The biggest change in Express Entry that we have been expecting from last 1 year has finally been officially announced by IRCC, and in this video we're going to talk exactly about that. In the last 1 year you might have heard a lot of buzz around Bill C-19 and the changes that it would introduce to Express Entry. So now these changes have officially been announced, and it won't be wrong to say that this is the biggest change in Express Entry since its start, and Express Entry draws would never be the same ever. So in this video we'll be talking about the 6 categories that have been announced today by Canada, and if you belong to one of those job categories or job occupations, then you might be the lucky one and you might get the ITA this year even despite having a low CRS score. Maybe. Now why I'm saying that you'll get to understand as we go along in this video. So we won't just talk about the 6 categories, but we'll talk about the Express Entry as a whole, how the changes are going to impact the Express Entry draws going forward, who would be those people who would benefit from this change, and who would be those people who would not like this change at all. And in the last 5 minutes of the video we'll even talk about those NOC codes belonging to those job occupations which would be eligible. If you're one of those, you could be the lucky one. So if you're already curious about the Bill C-19 and the changes, or you don't have any clue about these things, this video is going to be very important, so please watch this video till the end. So starting with the basics, all of those people who have no idea about Bill C-19, category based draws, what are we talking about? So around 1 year ago, Canada actually announced that they would be conducting category based draws. So at the moment, there is no category in the Express Entry draws. For example, if it's an all program draw and the cutoff score is 485, so all the people who would have the cutoff score of 485 or above would get the ITA irrespective of their job occupations. So you could be a carpenter, a program engineer, or maybe electrician, or maybe a doctor. All of those invitations would go to any of these occupations if you have the score above 485, right? But going forward, this is going to change because they have announced category based invitations, which would mean that now going forward they could conduct category based draws as well, which would mean that they can announce that these 5 NOC codes would be issued 500 invitations, and rest 3500 invitations could be distributed among all others. We'll talk about it in detail. That was just a rough idea I was trying to give you about these category based invitations. How is it supposed to work? So let's just first talk about the 6 categories that have been announced for 2023, and then I'll quote example from these 6 categories that would make more sense to you. So out of the 6 categories, 5 of them are occupation based and 1 of them is language based, which means the first category is French language proficiency, which would mean that would give preference to all those people who are French speaking. The next 5 categories are occupation based, the first one being healthcare occupations, the second one STEM occupations, third one trade occupations, then transport occupations, and the last one is agriculture and agri-food occupations. So I will talk about each of these categories towards the last of the video in very detail. You'll get to see the different occupations in these different job categories. But let me start from the top, which is the French category. They've officially named it as French language proficiency. If you score 7 bands in each of the 4 tests, reading, writing, speaking and listening, then you could get an edge and you would be eligible for this particular category. The second category is the healthcare occupations, and I would have been surprised if that category was not there. This includes doctors, nurses, radiologists, chiropractors. I'll discuss the full list towards the last of the video. Third category is the STEM category. Of course, IT is in high demand in Canada, so all the major IT occupations, DBAs, programmers, testers, all those occupations, and then of course we have electrical and civil engineers. All those are in this category. Again, I've discussed it in detail towards the last of the video. Then we have the trade occupations, which has carpenters, electricians, plumbers, etc. Of course, they are in high demand because of the housing, right? Then we have the transport occupations, which has truck drivers. Some time ago, truck drivers were not even eligible for Express Entry, and now they are in the specialized category. So congratulations to all of those who are truck drivers. You have a great chance of getting the ITA in the next few months. Then towards the last we have agriculture occupations as well. Okay, now when we have talked about these categories, let's just talk about how they could be actually conducting these different draws, how this will impact the regular express entry draws, who could actually benefit from it and who could be at loss here. So if you belong to any of these categories, then you are at advantage even if you have a low score. Let me explain how. For example, in any draw, they're inviting French-speaking candidates and you belong to the first category, which means you have 7 score in all the 4 different tests of the French language. Then in that case, if even your score is on the lower side, maybe your score is at 460. That might not matter because they might pick the top 100, 200, 500 people from that list. And even if your score is lower than the current cutoff score, you might get selected. Now, of course, we cannot predict the patterns how they will conduct these draws, but it is expected that these draws would actually go hand in hand with the all program draws. For example, if in any particular draw 5,000 invitations are issued, maybe 2,000 invitations could be for the general round and 3,000 could be for these categories. That could mean that maybe 500 could be for the healthcare occupations, 200 could be for the francophones for the first category, 1000 could be for the STEM category, and so on, right? They could divide that number among these categories. It totally depends on them. They could choose that one particular draw is not for any category and that's a generic draw, and in the next draw they could issue all the invitations to these different categories or maybe some of these categories. So of course all those candidates who belong to these categories would benefit from this change, but all those people who don't belong to these categories, there is no reason to panic actually, because they would still conduct the regular draws. However, there's a catch here. The quota is same. These category specific draws would be conducted from the same quota, right? There isn't a separate quota for these draws, which would mean that the cutoff score would go higher. It is already at the higher end, around 483, 485, somewhere around that. And going further, we could expect that it could even go up to around 500 on a regular basis. And then all the people who are maybe waiting at 460s, 470s might be disappointed if you don't belong to any of these categories. Okay, now when they're going to implement this change, they've suggested that this would be implemented in summer of this year, which would mean that starting January 21st to the mid of September, it could be conducted anytime, and it would be very interesting to see how they actually conduct it. Unless we see at least a few draws, we can't really predict how is it going to function, how is it really going to impact at the scores. We definitely expect the cutoff scores would go higher, but we can't say what would be the exact number. But don't forget, there are more than 80 occupations in these different categories. So for all those people who belong to these different categories, if you belong to a healthcare or a STEM category, then even if you have a low score, you could get the ITA. So guys, I think that the categories are well thought of and eventually would advantage many of you out there, and this might be a game changer. Okay, we have discussed about these categories briefly. Now it's time to discuss about these categories in detail. Which all occupations and NOC codes are actually covered in these categories? Let's just discuss about that in detail now.
Okay, so this is the page where all the details are mentioned. I'll provide the link in the description box below so you can also check it out. They have mentioned all the categories for 2023. These are those 6 categories. We already discussed about them before. But if you want to know more about these categories, we actually need to select these categories from these options provided here. Find out who is eligible for each category. So if you want to find out for the French language proficiency, we see that they've mentioned about French language test here. To be eligible, you must have French language test results that show minimum of 7 in all 4 language abilities, and of course meet all the requirements of that round. That is all for the French test. You need a minimum of 7 bands or a score of 7 in all the tests. Then moving further about the healthcare occupations. So if you see the work experience, they've mentioned that within the past 3 years, at least 6 months of continuous work experience in Canada or abroad. Which are those NOC codes? So there are 35 NOC codes that come under this category. If I select 50 from here, so all the 35 would be lifted in just one page. So this includes chiropractors, dentists, audiologists, licensed practical nurses, massage therapists, and this is of course a big list including nurse practitioners, including physiotherapists, psychologists, registered nurses, and many other that have been categorized under NOC 2021. So this is the occupation mentioned here. Then this is the 2021 NOC code, and this is the tier category. In my previous videos, I already discussed about the 2021 tier category, which was implemented last year. So if you want to know more about that, you can explore that video. We'll quickly move on to the next category. I'm sure there are many people waiting for this category, which is the STEM occupations. Same work experience, you must have accumulated within the past 3 years at least 6 months of continuous work experience in Canada or abroad. Then here, this includes 24 occupations. So if I select 25, this should have the complete list. So here we have architects, we have business system analysts, civil engineers. A lot of them are from the IT industry, a lot of the occupations. So you see the cyber security specialists, data scientists, DBAs, the computer engineers. Then of course you see electronics and electrical engineers, landscape architects. Many of them are here from the IT industry. Again, web designers, web developers and programmers, software engineers and designers. So overall 24 occupations from the STEM category are here. Then it comes to the trade occupations. So there are 10 of them from the trade occupations, including carpenters, plumbers, welders and electricians. Moving ahead, the next one is very interesting. This is the transport occupations. Again, in this category also we have 10 entries, which includes the transport truck drivers. This is a big one because earlier truck drivers were not eligible for express entry, but now destinies have changed because truck drivers who are from the tier 3 category are also in high demand. And apart from truck drivers, we have many other occupations from this category like managers in transportation, air pilots, flight engineers, flying instructors, air pilots, flight engineers and flying instructors, air traffic controllers, and many other that you can see in this list here. Similarly, the last category is the agriculture and agri-food occupations. So in here there are 3 occupations, all of these listed here, including butchers and farm supervisors. These are the different NOC codes for all these different categories.
Alright guys, so I really hope that the details shared in this video would have provided you some deep insights about this big change coming to Express Entry in the upcoming days. I would be really excited about these draws, how they actually conduct these draws. I would be making detailed videos on those. And yes, in the upcoming days, I might be making more videos on this topic, how this is supposed to impact the international students. Now, when you have these categories clear, even if you don't belong to these categories, maybe you can work towards these categories and it could work in your favor. We'll talk about all these important points in the upcoming videos. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please click the subscribe button. If you have any comments, any feedback, please put them down in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching this video. This is Shitanshu signing off.